Hello, I'm Eric, a sales rep here at Atlantic British. Today we're going to talk about building up a Discovery 2 into an off-road vehicle. They've gotten really affordable now. You can pick up a D2 for $3,500 to $5,000, put $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in it, and have a very good off-road vehicle. This one we picked up a couple of years ago. We've been driving it around. We've used it as a test mule, so now we're going to build it up into an off-road truck. With Doug's help, we're going to put suspension, front and rear bumpers, and then slowly build it up into a lifestyle truck. We'll have videos that'll show Doug doing each process, and we'll post those as time goes on. This truck's in good shape. It's very straight for the year, and we've had it for a few years, as I said. So stay tuned, and we'll have more information as time goes on.
I'm Doug, your tech support representative here at Atlantic British, and welcome back to Project D2. So we've done enough where we've looked at body protection, where we've added the steel bumpers and the rock slides and whatnot, but now we're going to look at protecting some of the components underneath. Probably one of the most important is going to be steering rods. Now you'll notice that the original equipment rods are pretty well exposed, both the Panhard rod and the drag link, and then your steering rod underneath. You catch a rock or a good sized log or whatnot and put a severe bend in one of those, and now your tires are pointing in and out. You are probably going to need a tow truck to get home. So what we want to do is we want to strengthen those areas as well to minimize any damage to the front end. So we're going to do that by installing the Terrafirma Panhard rod and the drag link and steering rods. Now the drag link and the steering rod comes together as a kit, or as part number TF255, and what you get is both those pieces along with a universal bracket that bolts on for the steering damper. The Panhard rod, now you got to make sure that you order the proper one. On the Discovery 2s, the TF254 is going to fit 99 to 2002, and the TF256 is going to be for 03 and 04. There are slight differences, so you don't want to get those mixed up. So you'll notice that these are considerably heavier in size. Not only that, the Panhard rod can be adjusted so that can actually change the position of your front axle. So keep in mind that after installing these, it is strongly recommended you bring the vehicle down to an alignment shop and have them do a toe set on the vehicle so that your tires are properly aligned so you get good tire wear. So this is what we're going to need to stiffen it up, and I'm going to show you how to install it. Alright, so what we're going to do is we'll start from the front and work our way to the back. It doesn't really matter what order you put these in. It's just easier in the long run. So we'll start with an 18 millimeter. You're going to have an 18 millimeter nut at this end. This is the steering rod in the front. We have an 18 millimeter nut at the other end, an 18 millimeter nut, and a 15 millimeter bolt. And we're just going to take those three out. And then we'll show you how to knock the rest of it loose and get it out of there. Alright, so now we got the nuts off at both ends. We've taken the bolt out, so the bottom end is now, we're just going to knock this out. Now you find that on this end, you're pointing straight up, so you really it's hard to get a tool up in there. So a fine vibration is usually the best way to knock them out. This is what's referred to as a brakeman's hammer, and I've found that over the years this has been my favorite hammer for doing things like that. You want to use a hammer with a steel head, not a dead blow hammer. A dead blow hammer is going to take the shock out, which is what you're trying to do. You need to administer shock to this so that it loosens and drops. And then what you can do is just lift up on the front, and the other end comes right out. So there's your steering rod. Okay, now what I mentioned earlier is taking this vehicle down to an alignment shop after you've installed these, but we want to try to get this close before we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of align it so that we have these at about the same length as the rod we removed. Now you've got a left-hand thread at one end and a right-hand thread on the other. So you're going to bring this out, and we'll bring this out about halfway. And we'll bring this out halfway. Left-hand thread means you're basically going to turn it as if you were turning it in, and yet it comes out. We don't have to be exact, but we'd like to try to be as close as we can. And you want to have about an equal amount of thread showing at both ends, so that when the alignment guy gets it, he's got a little bit of thread to work with yet. That's pretty good. Go one shot in. And it looks good. And then just to hold it in, we have these lock nuts. And we're just going to snug those in. That takes 1 1/16 wrench. Alright, so you have a tapered end on this tie rod that fits into a tapered section of the knuckle assembly. And that's going to drop in there. But you'll notice that you have a flat washer and a friction nut. Don't forget to use the flat washer. Now, one thing you're going to find is because you have a friction nut, that when you go to turn this, the shaft is going to end up turning. So I find the best thing to do is to take a long pry bar, and we're going to stick it under the knuckle assembly and then basically create pressure, downward pressure on the tie rod end, and that tapered fitting, that tapered area should lock together and you'll be able to run the nut in. Otherwise you'll just sit here and this shaft, the threaded area is just going to spin around inside the tie rod end. Before we do that, let's get the bottom section in, or the other end. Alright, then we're going to do the same thing with this end. I'll take a long pry bar. We're going to create upward pressure here so the tapered end ends up there, because this one we do have to put in by hand. We can't fit an air tool over the top. And then we'll install the other bracket for the steering damper. Alright, and last but not least, we'll put our bracket on for our steering damper. It's best we'll run the bolt through first, and then we can kind of position this where we want it. Now, you want the steering wheels dead straight. That's something you basically would have done before you even jack this up and start taking it apart. This way the steering dampener is in its neutral position, the steering rod is in position, and you'll notice that they put little grooves right here for this clamp to give you the proper position for this. So it shows you we're a little bit off center, so we just need to move that down in that area. Okay, so now we've got that in position. And we run our clamp up through the bottom. One flat washer on each side and one friction nut on each side. And again, they got it just close enough. It's being they're pointing up makes it a little difficult to put an air tool on it, so you're going to have to run these all in by hand. Alright, one is in. We'll get the other one on, and then we'll tighten down the nuts, and that'll be installed. Alright, so what we're going to do, or what we've done, is I've tightened the one clamp. Now you want to end up with about the same amount of thread on top of the nut on each side. That gives you a good indication that your clamp is on good and square and not cocked to one side or the other. Also, what it's going to do now is going to hold the bracket in position, because as you can see, this back bolt is rather hard to get at. So what we're going to do is, now that we've got the bracket pretty much locked in, we'll take the bolt out and we're going to move the damper on the back side, and that's going to give us a little more working room. Once we get that one, we'll tighten this clamp down the same way we did in the front, and your steering rod will have been installed. So we have both clamps in, equal amount of thread showing, so we know our clamps are on square. Our damper is now attached. You're going to notice when you first put it together that the bracket is going to be a little bit further away from the bushing. That'll squeeze in as you tighten it. This is a moldable metal, but it's just designed to fit a number of different items so that, you know, it'll fit whatever you put on there. So once you put the bolt through and tighten it down, it'll pull that bracket in and give it a good tight fit. So now, last but not least, we want to snug up our lock nuts for our tie rod ends. Don't make it too tight, just nice and snug. It's 1 1/16. This way, when you get it down to the alignment shop, they're not going to go crazy trying to get it unlocked. So then can't twist it, can't turn it, so that's good. We're in. The next is going to be the Panhard rod, which essentially holds the front axle in line, keeps it from moving side to side. And you've got a nut on the back side of this one bolt here. There's actually a metal tab you should be able to grab to be able to hold that nut, because it's kind of hard to get at. You can get it from the top, but you're going to have a wrench up in an awkward position. First thing I would recommend is obviously soak them down with a penetrating oil for 5, 10, 15 minutes first before you even attempt it. If you have the advantage of an air impact, all the better, because these are bigger than the bolts that you've changed on the 2 steering rods. They can be a little tough to get out. So if you have an air impact, all the better. If not, I would suggest a good 1/2-inch drive, like a 24-inch ratchet or breaker bar, to break them loose. It's a good sized bolt. You're also going to need a good sized pry bar. You want something at least that length, maybe even a little better. If you have it, the bigger the better, because this Panhard rod keeps the axle from floating back and forth. This is what holds it in line. So once you take the 2 bolts out, this axle is going to be able to float a little bit. You're going to need that bar to maneuver it back in place to get the 2 bolts started. And that's basically all the Panhard rod is held in place, is just 2 bolts in and out. And if you have a friend that wants to come along and give you a hand, all the better, because it's much easier when one person is on the pry bar moving and the other person trying to start the bolt. So again, that's all we need to do. We're going to take these 2 bolts out and install a new Panhard rod. Alright, so we removed the nuts off the back of these 2 bolts that hold the Panhard on in. And we were lucky enough to have one that both bolts backed off. But this is why I usually recommend, like I say, soak them ahead of time. Give them a good 10-15 minutes with some penetrating oil, and I usually find that works the best. So we just take the 2 out, and we're going to drop the rod right out of there. Now you're going to notice the rod has an offset, and that's for clearance around the front of the pumpkin. So we're going to make sure that we install the new one the exact same way. And I usually find we'll get one side in, and you got to wiggle this one in because everything's nice and new and fresh. So you find without doing an adjustment, this hole actually is about 1/8 of an inch towards the center. So we're going to turn it out 1.5 turns. Now, what you can do with this, by being able to do this, an alignment shop will be able to adjust the thrust angle a little better. So the alignment shot will put it on the gauges, and they'll actually be able to see if the rear wheels are lined up perfectly with the front, and if not, not only do you have the alignment of the centering of the wheels, and then of course the back bar sets the actual toe adjustment, you can actually move the axle left to right a little bit if you need to center it up. So we've got the right adjustment there. And we're going to have to see if we can sneak a wrench on that. Alright, so we know we got our adjustment. Take an 1.25 inch wrench. Let's snug that lock nut in. And there we go, we're in. Now we're just going to replace the 2 nuts on the back, lock them down tight, and then we're going to go back and let's get this back bar changed over. Alright, last but not least, now we're going to replace the rear bar. Now, this is sometimes referred to as a drag link, steering rod. Everybody's got different names for it, but essentially what this one does, and it is adjustable on one end, and as you either shorten or extend the rod, it will move the front wheels to what they call a toe in or toe out condition. So this is what they would be using, an alignment shop will turn to set the toe adjustment. The front rod that we first replaced will actually center the steering wheels to the track of the vehicle, and then the Panhard rod, it can be adjusted to actually center the axle to the frame. So overall, a very good combination. So just to remove this will be relatively simple. We're just going to run off that nut, the nut on the other side, tap it to loosen it, and what we're going to do is we'll take this side off first, because we're going to need to move it over just a little bit just to get enough clearance so that we can pop that side off without it hitting up against the pumpkin. Now, just as we did with the front rod, we're going to do with the back rod, and what we want to essentially do is set the new one up so the overall length is about the same. So we want to get as close as we can, and you'll notice on the back rod that one nut has no markings on it. The nut at the other end has little hash marks right on the corners. This indicates that this is a left-hand thread. So essentially, to run the tie rod out, you're actually going to spin it at where you would normally feel like it would be going in. Alright, so we have these lined up now so that we've got pretty much an even line on both sides. So satisfied with our length. So we take off the nuts and washers. And what I've done too is I've just snugged the lock nuts that hold the tie rods in place. It's kind of hard to tighten them when they're like this, but once we get it on the vehicle, it'll be a lot easier. Now remember, the original one dropped in from the top, so you're going to do the same with this one. And again, when you go to turn the nuts in, these are a nylon lock nut. So when you go to run the nut in, we're going to put a bar over the top of this and put some pressure on it so that the tapered fitting on the tie rod sits into the knuckle, gives it a good tight fit, and we'll have a good chance of the tie rod not spinning around. Alright, so what we've done now is we've got the back steering rod installed. The nuts are tightened down. Like you say, we had adjusted it so that the length was as close as possible to the one that we took out of there. And then just take an 1 inch and lock down on the two nuts that'll hold this rod from spinning, and just snug it. You don't have to make them super tight. And again, I'm just going to reiterate, you got it as close as possible, but it's still advisable. Take this to an alignment shop, have them do the toe set, and have them center the front axle. You'll end up with a lot better tire wear, a lot better handling. So when you're ready to beef up the steering on your D2 project, just give any of our knowledgeable salesmen a call, 1-800-533-2210, and thanks for watching.